One of the more common and yet slightly baffling questions that I get asked by people is whether they should buy the Xiaomi Yi camera or the SJ-Cam SJ4000. I say slightly baffling because they're quite different cameras. You see, the SJ4000's got a colour LCD screen on the back for changing the settings and viewing the viewfinder, whereas the Yi relies on a Wi-Fi app. The Yi does 1080p 60, whereas the SJ4000 only goes up to 1080p 30, although it does come with a lot of accessories, whereas the Yi just comes on its own. So as you can see, quite different propositions. However, I always suggest if you're looking at the SJ-Cam SJ4000, then you might as well look at the Dazzne P2 as well. That's my personal preference between those two cameras, because the P2 has the colour LCD screen on the back, albeit a little bit larger than the SJ4000, definitely seems to be better constructed and produces better quality video in my opinion. And there's a lot of fakes of the SJ4000 around as well, and you don't seem to get those on the Dazzne P2. Although these two cameras here, the SJ-Cam 4000 with Wi-Fi and the Xiaomi Yi, do have Wi-Fi on them obviously, and the P2 doesn't, and also the P2 can't do the 1080p 60 that the Yi does. So enter a new camera, the Dazzne P3. It offers Wi-Fi and 1080p 60 as well as all the other features from the P2. Looking at the obvious differences between the two cameras, the P2 has a rubberized coating, slightly reminiscent of an old Sinclair Spectrum keyboard, whereas the Dazzne P3 has this ruggedized, rough coating on it. Also, if you look at the lens units, you can see there's different sections inside the P3 compared to the P2, so obviously a new lens unit, new internals. And my favourite thing, the P2, when you tap that power button, it used to just switch on in your pocket, which was a bit annoying, whereas the P3, they've rectified that. You can't just tap it to switch it on. You've got to hold down the power button for a few seconds before the camera now switches on, so that's a much better way of doing things. I imported my P3 from China. This is the box it came in, lots of bits in there as well. I'll show you those in a minute. Quite a few dodgy translations on the box as well, but on the back, QR codes here, which enable you to download the Wi-Fi app for iOS or Android. We'll just have a look quickly what's inside here. So taking out the camera in its case, we've got a couple of wires in there. We've got a HDMI wire and a USB A to mini B instruction leaflet, so which is in English and Chinese, and then all these accessories on the left here. Now the mounts that come with this, I've shown these on the P2 video. It's quite interesting actually. These rotatable mounts, so you can see you can rotate the base 360 away from the top, which is a GoPro style mount, and you put one of those adhesive bits on the bottom when you want to stick it to something. Those are supplied in the box, of course. Just like with the P2, this one was supplied with 2 batteries and an external battery charger, which is still a nice feature. You can charge those batteries in the camera, of course, but you can also charge them externally using this charger. Plug in the supplied USB A to mini B lead, plug that into a power adapter into the wall, charge them up. Red lights flash when they're charging and stay on permanently when they're finished charging. Interesting fact is that the new batteries, even though they're the same size in dimensions, actually have a higher capacity than the ones supplied with the P2. You can see 1000 milliamp hours as opposed to the old 950. The battery lives are on screen there at the bottom, and those were based on the camera recording with the LCD screen turned off. Now the camera itself doesn't have a tripod screw mount on the bottom, which is something the Xiaomi Yi does boast. So if you want to mount it to anything, you're going to have to put it in a case like this one. I'll just open this up, and oh, that clip went off a little bit too easy there. Looked like I set that up, but honestly I didn't. I wasn't intending to do that, but it does clip back on, and I had a look since, and the idea is you can replace those if you manage to break one. I suppose that's the idea anyway, and they do sell spares. Anyway, looking around the camera itself, the Wi-Fi on-off buttons on the front. We've got 2 lights on this, just like the other one, but it makes more sense now because one of those lights tells you when the Wi-Fi's on, whereas on the P2 they just did the same thing. There's your power on-off or mode button, there's your shutter button, microphone, LED light tube, another LED light tube, speaker just for beeps, not for playing back audio, just beeps only. That's where you get your battery out. As you can see, very easy just to take the battery out, put another one in, nice little cover on that, clips in place easily. On this side we've got this cover on here, which you're probably going to lose, so you might as well just take that off, but it does slightly waterproof these connectors here, maybe against rain or something. And that's your USB mini B, HDMI micro out, and this is my micro SD card I'm putting in here, nice class 10 card. Now once you've got your camera switched on, that's your mode button, that's your shutter start, stop or forward button, and the one on the front's your back. So let's go through these menus. You see we're in the video mode here, and it goes straight back into it there. So if I tap it and leave it in the photo mode, after a couple of seconds goes back into the photo mode. Another one, this is the interval photography mode. and now we're in that. And then if we tap it again, this is the burst photography mode, and it goes straight into that. The next two things, playback, it won't go into those automatically. You have to tap a button on the top to go into those, same with the setup. So we won't go into that. We'll go back into the video mode here, just let it drop back into that, and that's what it looks like on your screen. As you can see, you've got a few bits of information around here, what mode you're in, how much battery life you've got, how much you can fit on the memory card, whether you've got the white balance in auto, things like that. Anyway, let's have a look at some sample clips from the camera. I've got some originals available to download. There's a link in the video description. There's also a link to a video up there which will explain why I haven't uploaded these to YouTube in 1080p 60, but you can download them and play them yourself in 1080p 60 on your own computer. Anyway, on with the clips. First off, let's have a look at this one. It's a P3. See at the bottom right there, put a little thing on the screen so you can tell which camera's which. I'm going to do a bit of back and forth between the P3 and the P2. So, as you can see here, reasonable quality. There's definitely a tendency towards the kind of yellow end of the spectrum, just a bit kind of sepia tinge. Let's go to P2 and have a look at that one. That one seems a little bit whiter all round, less of that tint to it. Smaller field of view, very slightly though, the field of view slightly cut in, still both massive. You're talking really wide fields of view. Now inside the Printworks here, I've shot the P3 on the 1080p 30 mode, because in a low light situation you don't want to be using a high frame rate. So to compare like for like, they're both in 1080p 30, so that's the P3 first of all, and we'll flip across to the P2. See there, that looks a little bit different. One thing that I've done also to enable me to tell the difference between the two when I was editing, I left the timestamp on the P2 at the bottom right, which can of course be turned off. So again, another situation where you can see the white building ahead of you there. It's slightly yellowy tinged, whereas on the P2 it does look more white. There's a definite difference between the video quality of the two. All the rest of the clips, by the way, of the P3 have been shot in 1080p 60, whereas the P2 are shot in 1080p 30. Whether or not 1080p 60 is that important to you is something that only you can decide. To me, I'm quite happy using 1080p 30 most of the time, but I know there's a lot of people out there that obsess about 1080p 60, and yes, you can get better freeze frames and slow motion out of a 1080p 60 video, so I can understand why some people would want to use it. But as you can see here, the P2 generally in the 1080p 30 mode, and even when it's compared against the P3 and the 1080p 30, seems to have the edge in image quality. One thing the P2 can't do though is this super slow motion. This is the 120 frames per second mode of the P3 that I'm showing you now, and I haven't done anything in editing. When you shoot with this mode and then play it back, you get this slow motion effect, which is really quite nice. Now there's another nice feature on the P3, and it's also on the P2 as well, and it's the ability to take still photos while it's taking video. So I'm taking this video now, but while it's doing that, in the background it's capturing stills as well. Every 5 seconds, here's the stills it's captured, which are a 2 megapixel still. Now this is a normal still that's been captured during video, and then this is a proper photo I've taken. There is a difference between the two. If we zoom in, that's the still, that's the 2 megapixel one zoomed in, and that's the photo. So there is a difference in quality between the proper stills and the captured frames. As you can see, you can get some quite nice photos out of this, but the real reason for having a camera like this is to take it out on a bike or do some action with it. So I've got it on my motorcycle here. I've stuck it in my pocket mount. Again, if you don't know how I've done this, I've got a link in the video description to the pocket mount that I've used. Anyone can make one of those for just a couple of quid. Notice on the handlebar there, yeah, I know everyone's going to mention, oh, is that a Sony 4K action cam? Yes, it is. I'm testing it out at the moment. Although, to be honest, it's going to be quite a while before I get any video out of that, because it's 4K. I've got no way of editing it at the moment without spending a hell of a lot of money. So I'm capturing video, but I haven't got round to doing anything with it yet. So you might have to wait on that one. But as you can see here, anyway, it looks nice at my end. Hopefully it looks good at yours. And again, as I mentioned, I've still got that capture mode set up. So while I'm recording this nice video, it's capturing stills at the same time. So this is a really nice feature. If you're out on your motorbike or something, you can have a still captured every 5-10 seconds, whatever. I'll show you the intervals later on. But then when you go back, you've got your video, and also on your memory card you've got a big list of stills. Now of course it does fill up your memory card, and it's quite hard finding those video files sometimes amongst all the stills, but you can see the effect that you get here is quite nice, and you get little photos basically of your entire journey. So that's a nice little feature, I think. Now again, to demonstrate the low light capabilities, I've taken the P3 out at night. I've turned the timestamp on at the bottom right there as well, which is the kind of thing you do in a dash cam. You can use this camera as a dash cam, have it auto start and stop, loop over the oldest video, all the things a dash cam can do. As you can see though, at night it's kind of okay, but in a low light environment like this one here where there's no street lights, it doesn't really do too good a job. In fact, let me show you a demonstration of what this looks like when it's done with a proper dash cam. I'm testing out a new dash cam at the moment, and I'll show you some footage from that using the same stretch of road, the exact same stretch, filmed at the same time, and that's what it looks like when it's recorded with a proper dash cam. I'm not going to tell you what that dash cam is yet because I haven't finished the video. Once I've got the video up, I'll have some links where you can buy one if you're interested in it, but a bit of a teaser there, isn't that exciting? But as you can see, a proper dash cam really does trounce the low light capabilities of the P3. But on a nice sunny day, it looks really good coming up the motorway here. Now, one thing I want to show you on this one, we mentioned the Xiaomi Yi. I know everyone will say I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't really care. But I mentioned that at the beginning, and I've got one little clip here where I can compare like for like. So this same footage here, I'll have both cameras in the windscreen at the same time, and I'll be able to switch over to the Xiaomi so you can see what that looks like on the same stretch. Now, again, the video, I can't really tell you what's going on here. It kind of looks softer, but it looks richer as well at the same time. They're both in 1080p 60 mode. Both clips look nice, but just kind of in a slightly different way to one another. I know people that are using the Yi camera really like it. Some people have it where they think the focus is a little bit soft, but overall it's a brilliant little camera. I've got nothing against it. In fact, let me bring it in from the side here so we can look at them side by side. So as you can see, different approaches to the same situation. I can't really tell you which is doing it better than the other one, but as you can see, both doing 1080p 60 video. So there you go, that's what the P3 looks like next to the Yi. Right, I wanted to do some different things in this P3 video that I hadn't done in the P2 one, so I managed to find this USB lead that I had in a drawer somewhere from another camera. I attached it up to the P3. You got to turn the TV out on, plugged it into the television. As you can see here, I've got an analog signal coming out of the camera into the television, and you can get through the menus and things like you'd expect, but also you're able to get into the main screen, into the video mode, and you can also start recording while that lead is in there. And the reason I'm demonstrating this is because this is useful for people with remote control aircrafts that want an analog signal that they can transmit back to their base station. So there you go, with the P3 that is something that you can do. Now, using the same lead in the P2 did absolutely nothing. Couldn't get anything out of it at all. Now, inside the box there is this micro HDMI lead, and when you plug that into the P3, again, you get the video on the screen there. Of course, better quality than through the analog signals, and again, you can start the video recording. Notice I've got the screen on the camera and on the television at the same time. Now, when you do the same thing with the P2, you can plug the HDMI lead in, get a live feedback. No screen on the camera though, and when you tap the button it doesn't start recording. So the P3 definitely better when it comes to that kind of stuff. And that leaves one unsolved mystery. On the P2 case there was this symbol on the side that seemed to indicate you could plug a microphone into the USB port. Now if you could do that, that would be excellent for a budget camera, and the same symbols on the P3 case. Now we tried it out with the P2, couldn't get it working, but why would they put the same symbol on two cameras? Surely it can't be a mistake on two cameras. So again, I dug out the GoPro 3.5mm microphone into USB plug. Didn't work, nothing happened. I then thought I'll fashion my own, so I tried making my own cable. Again, nothing, not even a crackle or anything on the microphone. So really don't know what's going on there, but they've still put that mic in symbol on the USB port on the new one, and I've just got to think it's a mistake. It doesn't seem to mention it anywhere in the specs, and it doesn't work at all. So again, I don't think you can plug a microphone into this camera, but I'd be happy for someone to prove me wrong. Now, when I got my P3 out of the box, it was using firmware version 1.01. I updated that using the firmware off the Dazzne website to version 1.04, which was the latest one at the time I started making this video in August 2015. Looking at the software differences between the P2 and the P3, they're not massive, although there are some slight improvements in the P3 with the text and things that make it slightly easier to get around and more obvious as to what you're doing. When I reviewed the P2, I was a bit critical of the operating system. I found it a bit confusing, but it's one of those things that grows on you, and now after using it for a while, I do find it's actually quite easy to get around, so I'm going to revise my opinion on that. Now let's have a look at some of the options on the screen here. I'll go through some of the main ones. If we start with resolution, you can see you can do 1080p, 960p, 720p or WVGA. Those are your 4 resolution options. Then you've got frames per second options. In 1080p it's 30 or 60 frames per second, and in 720p downwards it's those that you can see on the screen there. Now if we change the TV system from NTSC to PAL and then go back into those options, we'll see that we've still got the same resolutions, but the frames per second has changed. For example, in 1080p you can do 25 or 50, and 720p downwards you can go all the way up to 100 frames per second now. Some people will find that very useful in matching video recorded with this camera with video that they've recorded with other cameras. Now if you have a look at the burst mode, you can see you can take 10 stills in a second all the way down to 3 stills in a second. And if you have a look at the interval photography, we could go from 1 still every 2 seconds all the way up to 1 still every 60 seconds. And they are just stills, it's not time-lapse video or anything. If you want to take stills whilst you're recording video, those are your options on the screen there for your intervals, or you can turn it off entirely. If you mount the camera upside down, you can flip the menus and the video using an option. If you're using it as a dash camera, those are the different lengths of clips that you can set it to record. And of course the timestamp, yes, you can turn it off, or you can just have the date on its own, or you can have the date and the time. But remember, you can turn it off if you want. And then this is quite nice, the auto exposure bias. Whilst you've got the camera pointing at something, you can see how that will adjust it on screen. You can go up and down, plus and minus 2. You can choose what mode you want the camera to boot up in, whether it's video, photo or burst mode, and then you can also in the next menu choose whether you want it to start recording video as soon as it turns on, and you would turn that to on if you were going to use this as a dash cam. Now the other thing that I should mention, you want to change the auto shutdown to manual if you're going to be using the Wi-Fi mode, because if you're using it on Wi-Fi and you're just messing around changing the settings, things like that, the camera thinks it's not being used and will turn itself off unless you turn that down to manual. Now talking of Wi-Fi, let's have a look at the Wi-Fi app. The first thing you have to do, download it from the website, but it wasn't working for me when I first tried it, but after a couple of days they got their links working. So to turn on the Wi-Fi, hold the button on the front of the camera. You'll see the screen on the back of the camera says processing, and then after a few seconds the LED on the right hand side will light up in a kind of reddy orange to show that the Wi-Fi is on. And on the back of the camera, if you look at the bottom right, you'll see a little green indicator to show that the Wi-Fi is switched on. So we'll just get the Wi-Fi app connected up to the phone now, and it works the same way as any other Wi-Fi app that I've ever used does. You get the app, you might as well start that up now. It doesn't matter if you put that on first or second. So we've got the app running. Next thing we have to do, connect the camera up to the phone. So if I go into my setup here in the Wi-Fi options, you'll see the camera itself, Dazzne there. The password for the Wi-Fi, I've already entered that, but you'll have seen that on the screen where I showed you the firmware version. It's shown at the bottom of there. So back into the app now, and it's connected up, and we've now got a live video feed from the camera. So there you go, you can see that's working fine. So I'll just move the little car across here just to show you the kind of lag that you get. You always get lag with Wi-Fi apps, and this is no exception to that rule. So we'll start the camera recording in a minute. You can see we've still got a screen on the back of the camera showing the live feed. So I've started it recording from the app here, pressing that button at the bottom in the middle. Now you can see we've still got the live video on the back of the camera itself. It is recording. You can see the red light flashing there. And I've got the live video feed on there, but there's a lot more lag on it now once it's recording. As you can see here, if I move it, also we're getting the video breaking up as well. So really, it's all right for framing what you're going to record, but once you are recording it, no point looking at this to try and figure out what's going on, because really you're just getting a load of mess on the screen. I tried it on the Android app, see if that was any better. So you can see same thing here, start the recording off, and on this one there's no live feed at all. It just stays static until you stop the camera recording, and then you get the live feed back again. So I don't know which approach is better really. They both look pretty ropey once it's recording. This little slider at the bottom right is a digital zoom. Of course, the camera has a fixed lens. It's not an optical zoom, just a digital zoom, which is basically cropping in on the center of your image. Nobody should ever use a digital zoom, but I'm not going to come around and stop you if you do, but it's your own fault if your footage looks awful. And you can switch it at the bottom right here into photo mode if you want. Use that little slider there, take a still, slide it back to video mode. You've got the option at the top right to get into all the settings that we saw before in the camera. Of course, every one of them is in here, exactly the same settings, just laid out slightly differently. For example, if I show you the video options here, you can see they're all laid out on the screen. You can see them one after the other, all the different choices you've got for recording, your different frame rates and things. And if I actually go back out and change it into PAL on the TV system here, just so you can see them all, because I did sort of rush through it a little bit before. So that's all the PAL frame rates and resolutions on screen there. So you can change any setting you want using these menus. One problem I did encounter though, when I backed out of the menus and went back to look at the live stream, it wasn't working. I don't know what was going on there. I tried a few refreshes. In the end, a complete reboot sorted it out. But then I found that I couldn't download any clips that I'd recorded off the camera. This is the screen now, and that's the message that came up when I'm trying to download the clips I recorded earlier on. On Android, I got a little bit more success. You can see them loading in very slowly here, the thumbnails one after the other. Of course, downloading over Wi-Fi is always a painful experience. If you can possibly avoid it, get the memory card out of the camera or plug the camera into your computer, copy the files that way. Don't try and do it over Wi-Fi. You're dealing with big multi-gigabyte files that just take forever to download over Wi-Fi. But here's a file playing back. The camera records a low-res version and a normal-res version. It's the low-res version and it streams to your device. You can switch that off if you don't want it to record two streams at the same time, by the way. But then this has crashed as well, so God knows what's going on. The Wi-Fi app's a bit flaky on both Android and iOS. You're much better off looking at the footage you recorded on the screen on the camera itself, just to check you got the shot you wanted, and then copying it across to your computer when you get home. One thing you'll find though, when you do look at the footage on the camera, you get these little animated thumbnails of each clip, and paging through the different video files that you've shot takes a lot longer as a result, because it has to load those little clips in. I was just in the process of editing my video together and realised I haven't done a demonstration of the sound quality on the P3, so this is what you're listening to now, and as you can hear, it's not very good, is it? A little bit hissy, quite muffled, and the volume that I'm playing it to you is at 100%, and it's still quite quiet as well. And this is without the case on. I've got the waterproof case here. If I was to put that on the camera, you wouldn't be able to hear anything at all. So if you're looking for the better quality sound, then surprisingly enough, the P2 quite a bit better. Let's just have a listen to that. Right, so this is the sound quality on the P2, and as you can hear, quite a bit better than the P3. Now, maybe this is a faulty P3, I don't know, I've only got the one to test, but between the two cameras I've tested, the P2 definitely has better quality sound. And as you've noticed, hopefully, it seems to have better quality video as well. I've got both cameras set to 1080p 30 to take this. The lighting's the same on both shots, exactly the same situation. But when you compare them side by side, the P2 seems to be producing better quality video and sound. Okay, let's score up the P3. Well, I'm still very happy with the physical construction of the camera, the amount of mounts you get inside the box, the batteries, all that kind of stuff. However, the operation of this one, you know what, if it worked the same as the P2, I'd probably give that a green, because I've got used to the on-screen menus and things. But I'm really reviewing the Wi-Fi operation on this one, because that's the main feature that you're getting on this one that you don't have on the P2. And as you can see, the Wi-Fi wasn't really working very well. And then as far as the results go, well, on sound, I'd have to probably give it a red, but since I've got sound and video together, the video's kind of averaged it out and we've ended up as an amber, but it's your decision as to which of those you find the most important. Now, my P3 cost £109 delivered from China, and that's about the going rate, just over £100 for one of these with all the stuff. However, if you drop down to a P2, you'll find you can get those with all the stuff for about £60 or so. But I've also found out that there's some people selling them without all those additional accessories, perhaps just with the camera itself, a tripod mount, a cradle case, and just the one battery for under £30. Now, that is one of the bargains questions of the year as far as I'm concerned, because the P2 is an excellent camera. The P3, you know, I can take it or leave it. I'm not a big fan of 1080p 60. I don't need Wi-Fi on my cameras, but if you need a nice simple camera that works really well, I think the Dazzne P2 for under £30 is a bit of a bargain. Anyway, I'll have links to both these cameras in the video description. Also, you'll find links to downloadable samples up there. But for the moment, as always, thanks for watching.